The Eagles have never lost to the Houston Texans, and the team will need to extend the streak to increase its playoff chances. Good afternoon, Eagles fans. Happy holidays to all of you out there. Welcome to the Kickoff Show presented by Axalta. I'm Chris McPherson, joined alongside Fran Duffy, and we are half an hour away from the final regular season home contest of 2018 as the Eagles welcome the Houston Texans to town. The Eagles are 7-7 and right in the middle of the playoff chase thanks to last week's upset win over the Rams. And Fran, they're going to need a repeat performance going against a Texans team that has won 10 of its last 11 games and currently sits as the number 2 seed in the AFC.
And absolutely. So when you look at this from an Eagles perspective, that means that you're going to need to be able to run the ball efficiently, which they did last week, be good on third down, don't turn the ball over, and then defensively, let's create some of those turnovers. We saw that last week, 3 turnovers in that game against the LA Rams. If the Eagles can do some of that today, I think that'll spell Eagles victory here for sure at the Link.
All right, coming up on the show, we're going to have our key storylines to follow as well as the players to watch, courtesy of the Hall of Fame duo of Merrill Reese and Mike Quick. But first, let's send it over to Lincoln Financial Field, and we're going to check out number 9 getting ready for his 4th start of the season. Last week against the Rams, he completed 77% of his passes. Most importantly, he was not sacked. So, Fran, what aspects of his game from a week ago can he utilize today against a very good Houston defense?
Very decisive with the football. Whether he was attacking downfield or getting the ball out quickly, he showed the ability to be decisive. He wasn't holding on to the football. You mentioned he wasn't sacked. If the Eagles can do the same kinds of things schematically with him today, look, they leaned on a lot of those same pass combinations, those same concepts that they leaned on last year in the postseason for success with Nick Foles. They're not going to run the same exact plays they ran a week ago, but I would imagine you'll see a lot of the same concepts.
You mentioned the schematics and the concepts. It really did a good job of protecting Foles against a duo of Aaron Donald and Dominican Sue. Well, Houston has a pretty good duo of its own with J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney, but it's a little bit different in terms of how the Texans utilize those two.
Yeah, and you think J.J. Watt, he's going to come off left end, and Jadeveon Clowney's only going to be right end. They do move them around a little bit, but the main matchup here, watch J.J. Watt against Lane Johnson. That's where most of his reps will come, whether he's lined up a little bit outside of Lane or right head up over Lane. I think you're going to see most of J.J.'s reps come against the veteran right tackle. And then on the other side, Clowney, sometimes he's going to get matched up with Jason Peters. There will be times where he'll put his hand down and go up against JP, but most of the time, with most of his productive snaps, Chris, will come when he's standing up and moved around the formation, especially matched up against guards. So whether that's Brandon Brooks on the right side or Stefan Wisniewski on the left side, you want to keep an eye on Jadeveon Clowney. They move him around as that joker. He's not put it all together yet. I don't think he's quite lived up to that number 1 overall pick billing that he had a few years ago, but still a guy that can win one-on-one, especially when he's matched up inside.
The thing with Brooks is going against a team that drafted him in the 3rd round, and Brooks earned his 2nd consecutive Pro Bowl honor earlier this week. So why don't we take a look at the starting lineup for the Eagles offense here. Now, when it comes to the run game, the Texans are very stingy against the run, 4th best run defense overall, best run defense in terms of yards per carry. So the Eagles going with Josh Adams, as you see, as the starter, Darren Sproles, we saw a few moments ago, as well as Wendell Smallwood. They're going to have some tough sledding in order to make things manageable for Nick Foles, especially when you get to those 3rd down scenarios.
It's a very fast group, a very disruptive group. They love to get on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage and make plays. You want to run right at them. They haven't been a big play defense in terms of allowing those big plays either through the air or on the ground, but if you can run right at them, and that means if you look at this Eagles offense, those traps and those whams where the tight ends and offensive linemen from the backside come across and I'll block a J.J. Watt or block a Jadeveon Clowney. That's what I would expect from this Eagles offense today. Go right at these guys and see if you can start to wear them down.
I love the swag that Alshon Jeffrey has, taking the photos with the fans a few moments ago. We were just showing there. He created some of those big plays. And really, the weakness of Houston's defense is trying to defend those top receivers as well as tight ends. Zach Ertz there, 101 catches on the season, needs only 9 to tie the all-time NFL single-season receptions record for someone at his position.
Yeah, and you're right. They've had a lot of struggle protecting against some of the best playmakers in the NFL that are on their schedule. So if you're the Eagles, you're going to try and leverage some of those opportunities. Get the ball to Alshon, get the ball to Zach Ertz. We saw Nick Foles connect with Alshon a number of times last week. There were opportunities there for Zach Ertz. They just weren't on the same page on a few of those, and I would expect that to be corrected here today. So keep an eye out for Zach Ertz in this contest.
All right, let's start talking about the Eagles defense here. The line harassed Jared Goff to no end last week in Los Angeles, but didn't result in a lot of sacks. Well, the line's going to need that performance again going against Deshaun Watson, who is the most sacked quarterback in the league and has had his share of growing pains in his second NFL season.
I loved Deshaun Watson coming out of Clemson. So when you watch him, you see that the really, really good, and the goods are good. I post a lot of those shots on Twitter this week. You see a lot of the things that made him a top pick in the draft in 2017. But his bads, Chris, are really, really bad. And the thing that he struggles most with has been his pocket poise and knowing when to get rid of the football. I talked about how decisive Nick Foles was last week. That has not been Deshaun Watson for most of this season. He is a big part of why he's been sacked 52 times. Now, that offensive line is not great. The Eagles will be able to win some of those matchups in the trenches, and I think that with the way that they're playing, not just last week in LA, but go back the last few weeks against Dallas. They were really, really aggressive getting after Dak Prescott. They need a repeat effort with all those guys there. You see Chris Long, you see Michael Bennett, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, you see Timmy Jernigan back. Get all those guys back in. I think that's a big part of success today.
Let's look at the starting lineup for the Eagles defense. You mentioned Tim Jernigan returns. Jordan Hicks also returns in the middle. How big is that, especially when you add the fact that Lamar Miller, the running back for Houston, is out with an ankle injury?
Yeah, and they want to run the football, Houston. They run the ball just about more than anybody on first down. So they want to run this offense through the ground game. So getting Jordan Hicks back is big, but then it also helps when they go into sub-package because now you're not relying as heavily on Kamu Grugier-Hill and Nate Gary and those guys. Keep in mind, Houston is one of the top teams in the league in using multiple tight end sets. So Jordan Hicks in coverage, that's one of his strong suits. He'll be able to help in those situations.
We saw Avonte Maddox starting once again at corner. DeAndre Hopkins, arguably the best receiver in the league, especially in contested catch situations. Going to be a very tough task for this Eagles secondary.
Elite hands, elite ball skills. He's great off the line of scrimmage, very tough to jam at the line and press coverage. It's going to be a big test for Avonte and Rasul Douglas.
All right, what we're going to do now is send it back over to the link as Eagles insider Dave Spadera and Amy Campbell give you the key storylines to follow as well as their bold predictions.
Well, we do have a lot of storylines here, guys, and the Eagles getting ready for this must-win game against the Houston Texans. Amy, I'll let you begin with the storyline.
Yeah, first of all, I'm loving the holiday festive vibes. The vibes are good around here. I'm looking at the trenches, though, and we heard Coach Doug Peterson say earlier this week, it seems like the defensive front on the other side gets better and better every week. So this Eagles offensive line, very successful against the Rams defensive front, both protecting the quarterback and running the ball. But Houston, another defensive front with names you know, J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney, Whitney Merciless, and to put it in perspective, a tougher team to run against, whereas the Rams, 21st run defense in the NFL, Houston Texans, number 4. So a tougher test for the offensive line this week.
You're in the trenches, I'm on the outside. The Houston Texans offense revolves around one player, number 10, DeAndre Hopkins, and Deshaun Watson throws his way nearly 33% of the time. So almost a third of his passes going out to Hopkins, who's a game breaker, the best receiver that you really don't know about. So the Eagles have to figure out a way today to limit him. Can't do what they did in Dallas a couple of weeks ago. 10 catches, 3 touchdowns, 200-plus yards for Amari Cooper. Those are the storylines. Now, of course, it's time for the bold prediction. I was this far away last week.
Yes, you were.
So I'm going to start over again. You begin here.
All right, I'm going very bold based on what we've seen from the Eagles offense this season. I'm predicting that not only did the Eagles strike first on offense, they maintain the lead the entire game.
Coast to coast.
Something we haven't seen them do this season. I think it happens today.
All right, I'm going to go with the Eagles offense and Alshon Jeffrey. Such a huge game in Los Angeles last week will actually outperform DeAndre Hopkins somewhere to the tune of, let's say, 2 touchdowns and more than 100 yards receiving. I think Nick Foles will be able to exploit these Houston cornerbacks.
Nick Foles and Alshon Jeffrey really have a good thing going.
Yeah, they really do. And a good connection off the field, a great connection on the field, and that helps the Eagles offense today. Back to you guys at the NovaCare Complex.
Thank you so much and happy holidays, Dave and Amy. And maybe Amy's bold prediction will come true so the Eagles can make their way into the playoffs. We'll get more into the scenarios later on so that we have more cracks at these bold predictions because as you look at the standings, Fran and I haven't done so well this season. So, Fran, we got 2 regular season chances for you. What have you got for us here today?
I look at this one way. I'm given a task, and that's saying, oh, come up with a bold prediction. I'm 100%. I'm batting 1,000 right now in that I am picking the most bold predictions, so bold that none of them are coming true. So I'm going to pick the boldest prediction that I picked yet. I have no idea if this is going to work for me or not, but I think that the Eagles running backs are going to run for 125-plus yards here today. No offense has been able to do that against this Houston team today, but I'm hoping, Chris, that they're able to run right at these guys. Josh Adams, Darren Sproles, Corey Clement, Wendell Smallwood, get them downhill in this game. I think that will be a recipe for success.
All right, for the Eagles to have success in the run game, they're going to need the offensive line to step up huge, and that's going to be the source of my bold prediction. Last week, talked about how Foles was kept clean by the offensive line. Well, we talked a lot about J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney, a combined 22.5 sacks this season. I think that they are shut out today. Stefan Wisniewski was huge last week in keeping Donald contained. I think the whole offensive line, as we talked about, is going to need to step up in a huge way. But I think at the very least, Foles is kept clean by the likes of Watt and Clowney not being able to get to him today. So those are our bold predictions. It's time now to send it to the Sports Radio 94 WIP broadcast booth, where the Hall of Fame duo of Merrill Reese and Mike Quick are standing by to give us their players to watch.
Chris, it's another beautiful day here at Lincoln Financial Field as the Eagles play another one of those must games against the Houston Texans. Mike, who is your player to watch?
Well, I'm going to go into an area where I haven't gone before. It's Jason Kelce. Because of this front, this is one of the best seven-man fronts that this team has ever faced, will ever face, and he has to direct the traffic up front because they're going to bring a lot of different pressures, and they show it in a lot of different ways. Jason Kelce directing that traffic up front, he's going to be my guy to watch.
Okay, my guy is going to go from the defense. Number 55, Brandon Graham. You need him to come up with some sacks. Do you know this year the Texans have only scored 4 touchdowns when they've been sacked in a series? So Brandon Graham is hungry for more sacks, and today might just be his day for multiple sacks. So, Chris, those are our keys and people to watch in today's game.
Thank you so much, Merrill and Mike. Remember that you can listen to their broadcast from anywhere in the world on PhiladelphiaEagles.com/live radio. All right, Frank, let's dig more into this matchup here. And not a lot of history between these two teams. Remember, the Eagles have never lost to the Texans. There's only one other franchise that has never defeated the Eagles. Do you know who it is?
It's a good question. I'm going to go with the New York Jets.
Very nicely done. Always on top of your game. So going back to the Texans, the last time these two teams played was 2014. Nick Foles was actually the starter that day. He was 6-2 as a starter. He suffered a season-ending collarbone injury and never made another start for the Eagles that season or until he came back to Philadelphia because he was traded that offseason. So getting back to the Texans this season, look, this team started slow out of the gate. Was 0-3 before winning 10 of 11. What has been the biggest key to the Texans' turnaround?
Well, I think the big thing was, remember, you had a young quarterback, a second-year quarterback, coming off of a serious knee injury in Deshaun Watson. So he tore his ACL last October. So him coming back, he was a little bit slow to get things going. And then defensively, they were able to just put things together. But just keep this in mind. This is not a team that's blowing teams out of the water. They've not gone. It's not like what the Eagles were doing a year ago. It's not what the Rams were doing earlier this season, what the Saints have done. They're not just coming in and blowing teams out double digits each week. They've just found ways to win. And that's a credit to that coaching staff, to Deshaun Watson, that defense. They've really just been able to put everything together and find a way to win each week.
So 10 one-score games for the Texans this season. The 4 losses by a combined 18 points. The one area they've been outstanding at is protecting the ball. Third best turnover ratio differential in the entire NFL. I believe it's 4 straight games without a turnover. It certainly, when you're protecting the ball, as much as we talk about Watson being a high-variance quarterback, at the very least, he is protecting the ball.
That's why I feel like if the Eagles, I mentioned it earlier, if they can come out and force an early turnover and, the crowd's loud, the pressure's up, I think that really can kind of turn this tide and keep Deshaun Watson thinking, man, I'm not really feeling this right now.
All right, so we don't talk a lot usually about special teams, but Houston has one of the best special teams units in the league, 5th overall according to Football Outsiders. Special teams played a huge role in the Eagles' win last week with DJ Alexander coming up with that muff punt recovery. Alexander is actually out today with an injury, but a player to note here is former Eagle DeAndre Carter, who was a starting punt returner earlier in the season. After he was released by the Eagles, he was claimed off waivers by the Texans, and not only is he being key on special teams as a punt returner, he's also helping out the offense as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. And they will miss DJ Alexander today. I think that one thing to look at for in this game, though, is that with the return of Jordan Hicks, that allows Nate Gary and Kamo Grugier-Hill to kind of slide into the more natural roles as the 3rd and 4th linebacker, and I would think that they'll get more snaps on special teams because of it.
All right, so we've talked about what's at stake for the Eagles today. Let's get into those playoff scenarios. And beginning the day the Eagles can still win the NFC East. Of course, the Eagles must win their final 2 games, and the Cowboys must lose their final 2 games. They play Tampa Bay today, and I feel, Fran, if the Cowboys do go down to the Bucs today, the Giants don't have a ton to play for, but I'm sure they would love to play the role of spoiler. And the Cowboys might be feeling a lot of pressure going into that matchup, knowing that everything was set up so nicely for them.
That will be a lot of heat put on Jason Garrett and Dak Prescott and Zeke Elliott, that whole group, if they have to go in a must-win situation next week in New York. The other thing that I would say is kind of been undersold a little bit. With the Eagles upsetting the LA Rams last week, now the Chicago Bears, they're within striking distance with that number 2 seed. And that means next week when they play Minnesota, they're going to have plenty to play for and trying to win that game. And the Eagles, again, they only need Minnesota to lose one time.
Correct.
If the Eagles win both. So they have to win today. But if Minnesota can lose that game next week at Chicago, the Eagles win out, Eagles are in. Whether it's division or not, Eagles are in the playoffs.
Washington is still in the mix, even though they lost yesterday. But the thing is, for the Eagles, no matter what happens today, they absolutely must win Week 17 against Washington. So we've got a lot more coming up for you here on the Kickoff Show presented by Axalta, including a one-on-one interview with linebacker Kamu Grugier-Hill. So it's that time where if you're following us on Facebook or Twitter and want to keep watching the show, you need to come on over to PhiladelphiaEagles.com or the app. We're going to give you this break to get situated.